Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Flags in a Gym, a podcast dedicated to all things color guard. My name is Eric. I'm your host and resident color guard nerd, and we are back from our post-Dayton break with our first episode in a new series spotlighting programs from across the country. For today's episode, I got to sit down with the director, Bryan Ayala, and designer Tim Newburn of Emerson High School in Texas. And we had an amazing conversation where we talked about their program, discussed what it's like to get bumped to a new class mid-season, and getting their thoughts on why Texas color guard is booming, plus much, much more. So sit back, relax, and let's talk some color guard. Hello, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Tim, how are you?
Great. Thanks for having us on.
Yeah, my pleasure. So we are sitting down with the staff of Emerson High School out of Texas. They were your fifth place Scholastic Open guard this year, and they reached out and wanted to talk about their program, and I'm happy to do it. So before we get started, why don't you go all take a quick 30 seconds-ish to just kind of give everybody the basic rundown of who you are, how you got in the activity, and whatnot. Bryan, I'll have you go first.
All right. Hi, I'm Bryan Ayala. I am the color guard director here at Emerson High School. I got into the activity back in 8th grade going to 9th grade because I didn't want to march bass clarinet because it hurt my thumb while I had to hold it up. The irony is that I hurt my thumb throughout my entire marching career. So I was born in California and I moved over to Michigan when I was 6 years old. I grew up in Michigan at Godwin Heights. That's where I was starting my color guard career. My high school did not have a winter guard. So my instructor told me to go audition for interplay when I was a freshman. And so I marched interplay winter guard for my entire high school career. Shortly after I graduated, I did Blue Coats Drum and Bugle Corps for 2 years before I did Crown in 2014. I didn't age out in 2015 because I couldn't afford it. Drum Corps fees, big sad. And then in winter guard, I auditioned for Onyx World in 2014. And then I marched Onyx in 2014, and 2015, and 2016. And 2016, I was captain. And then I started my directing journey in 2017. I had no idea what I was doing. And then ever since then, I've just been a director. I've loved it. I love seeing the kids grow. I love the competition side of it. I just love being a director.
Excellent. Tim, how about you?
Well, I got my color guard education at Cavaliers and Escapade. For all those dinosaurs out there that still remember that group, I spent probably 25 years being the caption head, program coordinator, visual designers for an assortment of drum corps. I ran my own high school programs here in Texas for a long time, and I was the director of Cypress Independent for all 10 years that we fielded the color guard. I retired from full-time teaching in 2019 when we folded Cypress, and tried to retire from the activity and just be a designer, and have found myself currently as an independent designer, clinician, judge. But with my high school winter guards, I have ended up with this unique schedule of being able to spend one afternoon with each of my clients every day of the week here in the Houston area. And most of those director are Cypress alumni. So it's really good to reconnect with them and help mentor them in these next steps. It also allows me to still teach and be a little hands-on and experience education at that level, because as much as we all, complain about it on the day-to-day and can't wait to retire from it, we all seriously miss it when we step away. So I am currently getting my fix, but it's nice not to have to deal with facilities or mommies or schedules or any of that. I just get to do all the fun parts now.
Yeah, no, I totally understand it. It's hard to get away from it, but yeah, I just want to go to rehearsal, teach some flag, and go home. I don't have to worry about anything else. Bryan, how did you end up teaching at Emerson High School?
So it was kind of fate, really. So I moved out to Texas back in 2022, 2023, I forget exactly when. Now I was working at Flower Mound High School with Ian Lewis, and I think last year when I took over, or when I originally took over at Emerson, their director, Kelly Brown, which was their original director at Emerson, reached out to Ian asking me if I wanted to apply for the position because they were looking for a color guard director, and she really wanted to hand it off to someone that would really continue to take the program and grow it. And so I was kind of honored that they reached out to me. And I didn't know anything about Emerson at the time, other than it was a new Frisco school. And I saw them once at a regional while walking through the hallway, but that was about it. And so they reached out, I applied, and then I got the position. And it all happened within about a week or so time span. And I think it actually happened around this time 2 years ago, if I'm being honest. So it's kind of a late hire, but they were looking for a quality person to bring in and just really continue to grow the program. And I'm thankful that I've been in this opportunity to be able to give them that. So that's how it came about, all due to connections, all fate.
Yeah, I mean, we love it. I mean, that's one of the best things about color guard is those connections you make and those lifelong friends. We had talked earlier, and you mentioned that it's kind of like the program's fourth year. Is the school newer, or is that just kind of when the guard really got started?
Oh no, it's a brand new school. So it opened back up in 2021 or 2022. And then the first 3 year senior class graduated last year, and then the first official 4 year senior class is graduating next week. So brand spanking new.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. Because you had mentioned that the program has grown from 4 kids to over 40 in 4 years. So I was like, is this a new school? Like, how does a Texas guard only have 4 kids unless
Yeah.
it's brand new? That's an incredible achievement. Like, how does that happen? Like, how did you grow the program so quickly?
So it happened from a mix of different things. So obviously, like when Kelly Brown was here, there was only 4 guard members, and then from there, she did a lot of recruitment to bring the program up to about the mid 20s, low 30s. And then from there, when I came in, the first thing I wanted to do was get into the middle schools and start doing recruitment at the middle schools, whether it's performances or just actively talking to them about joining, or just creating a middle school club in general. So last year, we didn't get the opportunity to create a middle school club, but we at least got in there and performed for them. So they got to see the color guard a little bit more. And our incoming freshman classes from last year going into this year and this year going into next year have been really huge because of it. And then this past season, we also started up a middle school club. And that was honestly the biggest explosion of growth that we had because this year we're graduating 13, 14 seniors. And
Wow.
so we managed to stay the same number even with that many seniors graduating. And that's all because of the middle school club influence. So just having a middle school program really helped us really explode.
That's great. Yeah, because I've been so intrigued by what I've termed the Texas explosion. You go back, I want to say about 10, 12 years, all of a sudden, all these guards are coming out of Texas. Like so many Scholastic Open guards, WGA finals, you're hearing the Stars at Night over. And I mean, this past year, we heard it so many times. Like, what would you say is the reasoning for the explosion of color guard in Texas? Why has guard gotten so big and so successful? Tim, what are your thoughts? I mean, you've been in Texas a long time.
Yeah, I moved here in 2003, so it's been a hot minute. I think the initial draw is just the funding. The support of the arts in Texas is very strong. Most of us are fortunate enough to be paraprofessional positions at our school. We receive benefits, we get a class period. And so anyone who's really serious about building a high school program, of course, is going to be drawn to that, not just for the financial support, but also because facilities are strong. We've got the backing of our administration. And then I think, so, in the early 2000s, you saw people from different areas start to migrate to Texas. And so there was a bit of an influx of information and resources, design wise, educationally. But then probably 10 to 12 years ago, they started lifting the rule where used to be that Texas school districts would only let groups go once every 4 or every 2 years if you were lucky and compete nationally. And for a while, that was the color guard was an umbrella to the marching band. So if your marching band wanted to go compete at Grand Nationals, then your color guard had to wait 2 years to go to WGI. And if you went to WGI, so you were really only going if you were part of a competitive marching band, you were only able to go every 4 years. And so I think that's why it's taken Texas a while to sort of be more well known on the national stage. And I think it feels like we're all coming out of the woodwork lately because a lot of districts have lifted those rules because a lot of groups are self-funded for their trips. So if you want to go, then you have to fundraise the money or the students have to pay or whatnot. It's not, supported by the district in that way. And so I think when that rule was lifted, I think you're seeing more groups travel annually. Like even though the Woodlands still has the every other year rule in place in their school district, and they had to barter to be able to go back to back because they knew that this was a huge senior class year for them, and Cindy didn't want to miss out. And so now they're going to be gone for a couple of years. We won't see them, unfortunately, at WGI for a couple of years because they had to barter to go back to back and then wait a couple instead of going every other.
That's a shame. I mean, I love that the rules are being lifted, but that really sucks for the Woodlands.
Yes.
I mean,
I'd love to see
they
them every
won
year.
Scholastic World. Yeah,
Right?
you want to see them back every year. Exactly. That's so fascinating because yeah, that explains a lot because I'm like, obviously everything's bigger in Texas. It's the, the running joke, and marching band football has always been big. I mean, you see like the BOA super regional down in San Antonio, and you see the bands that go there, but it's just like they don't all go to Grand Nats, they don't all go to Dayton, and this is a good explanation as to why.
There have been years where bands don't make finals in San Antonio at the BOA Power Regional there, and then we'll go to Grand Nationals a week later and make finals at Grand Nationals. I mean, Texas is very competitive.
Yes. I remember looking at the BOA
going on
scores
down here that not everyone gets to see nationally. So I'm excited that more groups are traveling.
Agreed. Yeah, I'm all for it. I think Texas set a record this year for 17 finalists in Dayton. For Texas itself, like obviously not a record for the most from any state, but for Texas, they had 17 finalists this year across all the classes, which is a record for them. And next year, hopefully more.
Mm-hmm.
And change that rule on Woodlands because I need to see them next year because they were incredible this year.
Start a petition.
Yeah, right. So you compete in the NTCA, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
That's the North Texas Color Guard Association.
Mm-hmm.
And I do want to talk a little bit about your circuit because a lot of people have reached out to me. They would love to know how the circuits work because especially in the Pennsylvania, Delaware area and New Jersey where AMP is, like their circuit championships are like 3 weeks after Dayton. Like, people are like, how you keep spinning after Dayton. So people are always intrigued about how the different circuits work. Just to give everybody kind of a rundown of what I did a little looking of some of the notable groups within your circuit. So you had Scholastic A finalists, Wiley High School and Melissa High School. The Melissa got promoted to Open. Also, I noted Azel because I think they made finals last year, and they were close, I think, this year. And the Colony was close as well. I mean, there were so many when I was going through this list. I'm like, I can't read them all. Scholastic Open, you have Marcus High School, Little Elm, and is it Coppell or Capel? Coppell?
I say Capel, but I'm also not from here, so I could be butchering that one as well. But I think Capel High School sounds correct.
And then Scholastic World, you have Flower Mound. Independent World, you have Menage and Mirage. I mean, these are lots and lots of groups. And obviously, of course, Emerson High School as well. Mm-hmm. What's it like competing in such a hyper competitive circuit? Because where I'm from, our circuit is a rinky dink. Like we have 2 successful programs. They're independent open guards. And that's basically it. I could not imagine competing in a circuit like this, where you're just like listing all of these accolades of like, does that put extra pressure on you to like, how does that work?
I mean, it originally did a little bit, but when I was a director in Michigan, I decided to step away from that and be a director in Florida in the FFCC organization. So I had to already learn how to compete against like Stephen Porter at Lyman or Michael James at Oviedo. So I at least had some experience of being able to compete against some of those elite programs already. So when I got here, it was still overwhelming with, I've known of Little Elm before I even moved to Texas. I knew of Marcus and Flower Mound and like the entire Louisville ISD before I even got to Texas. Like I knew about all these established programs when I first got there. I was like, okay, I'm really going to work my butt off on my end as a director. I'm going to think outside the box a lot as an educator. I'm going to have to really find what works best for us, so we can stand out and we can really learn how to not just be in this class with all these amazing groups, but also to learn how to compete with these amazing groups. And I'm thankful with my time at Flower Mound because I got to learn a lot about what Texas Marching Band and what Texas Color Guard was like. And I got to learn from Ian Lewis and got to really grow even more just by learning under him. So when I got into this director position at Emerson, it just felt a little bit more natural to be able to compete against these groups and not have as much doubt within myself or my ability to bring a program there. But the only thing I knew in the back of my head was, I mean, when we were in A class against Wiley and Melissa, I saw both of them perform at the first WGI regional in prelims. I was just like, oh my God, these groups are incredible. And in the back of my head, I was like, we're not first, we're not second, we're probably somewhere in finals after seeing some of these incredible groups. I mean, I was just eyeing over Azel as well at that same regional, just thinking like, oh, like I know we're doing a good job, but like there's no way these groups are incredible. So it's just for me, it's a very humbling experience, but at the same time also drives me to be better.
And how does A class work within your circuit? So, because I know A class is the backbone of the sport. There's a lot of A guards across the country. Does your circuit break up A into different categories, or is it all just one? How does that work?
So for our circuit, we break it up into two categories, three if you count double A, but we have our Scholastic A and we have our National A. So our Scholastic A groups are A class groups who don't want to compete against the National A groups, and our National A groups are all the groups who plan on attending Worlds, whether it's this year or in the upcoming years. But the only distinguishing factor is that you either will get compared against Wiley in your National A round, or you're going to be compared against Rockwell High School in your Scholastic A round. So it just depends on who you are and who you want to be compared next to in terms of the product of the show and all that.
Okay.
But we have two for that. And they're relatively big. I think our national A circuit is around 20, close to 20 color guards, and our Scholastic A circuit is around 30 plus color guards, just within those two circuits alone. So altogether, we have at least 50 A class color guards in general.
You're north of Dallas, right?
Yeah.
Now north of Dallas, Fort Worth area. Do you cross into different circuits for competitions? Like, because there's so many circuits in Texas, like do you all other outside of the WGA regionals, but like do you go to a different regional just to, isn't TCGC another one, I think, right? Am I making that up?
Yeah, TCGC is the other one. I think that's further south. I know Tim has more experience with the TCGC circuit and that.
TC started servicing the Houston area, and then as Austin started growing, they started servicing them, and now they're also servicing the Valley. Although the Valley has their own circuit as well called TECA, but the population in Texas is huge. Typically, color guards don't travel between the circuits just for circuit shows because we have so many WGI regionals.
Yeah.
I mean, if you had the budget to travel and you wanted to fill out your WGI calendar, you could catch a regional in Texas every other weekend from about the middle of February to the end of March.
Yeah, lots of regionals in Texas, and they are full every year. It's crazy.
We typically close out on the first day of entries.
I believe it. It's wild. I remember watching, I think it was the Austin regional. It was the beginning of March. Might have been Austin. I just remember there were like 22 Scholastic A guards in finals. So it means there was like 40 plus. And it's just like, wow. Like there's just, I mean, that's why I'm just talking about like, just like there's so much color guard in Texas. And it's just like, how do we get that to Dayton?
Yeah.
Like if Texas just decided to storm Dayton one year, I mean, watch out. That's interesting. And just normal competition schedule. So you start late January-ish and then finish end of March-ish.
Yeah, end of March. So we always have our state championships before Worlds happens. So we're not one of those circuits that goes after, which I have no idea how they do it, but oh my God, I forget my show the second I'm done with championships.
I've marched in one of those. So I marched in the TIA circuit. It's in the Delaware, Pennsylvania, Southern New Jersey area. And so you have your chapter, which is like your little, like almost like your school district. So you compete within your little chapter after Dayton. Then there's a week break, and then you go to Wildwood, New Jersey, which is all chapter championships. So it's like your full circuit. So it's almost May when you're doing your last performance. And it's just because we were an open guard at the time, we had people that couldn't march because of the age rule. Like they couldn't march after Dayton.
Oh,
so we had to march like 3 holes after Dayton because they were allowed to march up until Dayton because of the age rule. But after that, they were done, So it's just like, I don't know. It's very weird. It's very weird. Being a Texas guard, it's my understanding that pretty much every school has a color guard class. Is that true for you as well?
Yeah, that's true for us as well.
So how does that work? Because there's always been rumors and talks about possibly starting that in this area. It'll never happen. But like, how does a guard class work?
I'm not sure how the logistics from the administration side of it work, but I just know that they classify it as like an actual color guard class. So I have to plug in grades. I have to make sure I take attendance and all the logistics of an actual classroom. But there's no actual structure as to what the criteria needs to be. So I just do like taping. We attended the show. Here's 100. So simple things like that from the logistical side. But as for the class itself, I just mainly use it as either choreography or technique training. In the fall, we'll go outside and actually do drill and choreography and like really break down like an 8 count section of the show within that hour time span of class that we get. So we can really get some additional time without breaking the UIL rule. Because in Texas, we do have the UIL restriction of rehearsals can't be longer, or the rehearsal week can't be longer than 8 hours. So we have to stay within that 8 hour time frame. But the class, I don't think, and Tim, you can correct me, I don't think the class counts as the 8 hours. So we
Correct.
get to use the class to get some additional practice time in. And how you use it can really help the program in any way you need it for the marching season, and especially any way you need it for the winter season. And for us in Frisco, we normally have one color guard class, but after last year, I did convince the school, since especially since Emerson was getting so large, to split the color guard into two. So now I have two classes at Emerson. I can put my JV in one class, I could put my varsity in the other class, and really just work one on one and allow each group to grow with what they need exactly. Because when I put all of them in one class last year, I had to teach the varsity and the JV, and it just one got good information and the other one was on their own. So it wasn't as impactful. But now that I get two, it's definitely a lot more impactful for the program overall. But that's how I do my class program. And again, the logistics of it, I think the school just has to be able to approve it. I think it's going to come from the band director itself. But Tim, do you know any more about that?
I think every school district sets it up just a little bit differently. And, like Brian's alluded to, each director can decide how they want to allocate their time. I think one thing that Bryan does very intelligently is he doesn't just clean show. He makes sure that he filters in technique training, whether he's using his class period for that or he is, cleaning during class because he knows he wants to spend the first half of rehearsal at night in a dance class or in a technique block. Or I think that's one of the things that has helped Emerson grow so much so quickly, because as true color guarders all know, everything starts with your technique program. And unfortunately, with the demands of the competitive season, sometimes even the best of us forget that. And I think that Bryan and his staff are really good about being true to the training process. And I think you saw that show up with the Emerson students at WGI. They went in and laid down 3 very similar run throughs because that's just what they're trained to do.
And it's also super nice having those classes because again, someone from not from the state, the whole UIL rule was so new to me. Like coming from the Midwest where we would rehearse like 20 hours a week with the program to now being restricted to 8. For me, the biggest hurdle I had to overcome as a director was how do I still create 20 hours worth of efficiency and 8 hours restriction? So class for me was just like, okay, we can definitely get a lot of technique done within the class period and use that to our advantage. So rehearsal can be solely on rehearsing if we needed it to be.
And do they have class every day?
Oh, at Emerson we have class every other day, but we're on a block schedule, so I'll see my JV every other day, and I'll see my varsity every other day. So I'll be in class every day. And I know other programs. When I was at Flower Mound, we had class every single day. So it just depends on the district itself and what they want to do with it. I was just going to say, I believe some of those 6A programs have class every day, and the 5A programs fluctuate between a block schedule every other day.
Gotcha. And where do you rehearse? Like, do you band room outside? Do you have like because I mean, it's color guard, like you need space.
Yeah. So I guess this will answer one of your questions that comes up later. But for us, last year we used the gym as our class. So we had the auxiliary gym, and we had that every single class period up until STAR testing week and like ACT, SAT week, where they did have to kick us out. But it wasn't just us, they would kick out the dance team to also get that situated for testing week. But going into this year, they did mention the idea of using the field house. And I'm all for it because that means we don't have to put down tiles, which takes up a little bit of time. And we can just immediately go in there. There's yard line markers already, so we can practice fundamentals with any new members and still keep a facility and a space that we can use at any given day. And the bright side about the field house is that come testing week, there was nothing happening within the field house, so class would just continue as always. But majority of the time, our classes would be either in the gym or the field house. Every now and then, it'd be in a classroom, so I can show a video or talk about some logistical things. But that's very, very few times that we would do that.
That's fascinating. And I mean, just listening to you all talk, it makes clear sense why Texas color guard is booming. I mean, just being able to have that dedicated time every single day to train your kids, and they give you the space. I mean, it's a completely different world where I am, and that would never happen here. So I'm a little jealous.
Different too, because I know a few years ago, I moved from Michigan to Florida to go be the director at Sebastian River High School. And they also had class time, but their class time was in the auditorium. And so we never really got the privilege of having class time in a gym. But going from Florida to Texas, I'm seeing like, again, like how you're talking about, like there's clearly a clear difference between Texas and everyone else, especially when it comes to facilities. Like in Florida, we're restricted to the auditorium for class. And in Texas, we get either the gym, the cafeteria, the field house. We have a plethora of options. Even some schools are lucky enough to even have their own color guard like space, which is a nice 60 by 90 space with mirrors and all around, which I'm a little jealous of. But again, at the same time, I also understand everything's bigger in Texas.
Yeah, I'm insanely jealous because here we fight for the cafeteria, or maybe you're in the auditorium and you maybe get the gym in March once basketball's over. Like it's crazy. So yeah, because I was going to ask, because you're in Texas, weather's generally fair most of the year. It's like if you don't have gym space, you just go outside. Because it was like, oh, they can just open the floor in the parking lot if they want and practice. But hearing you talk, it sounds like that you don't need to worry about that.
Nah, we did have to do that once or twice every season. So I know I did it last year and I did it this year. There was one or two times we were outside, but it does do a popular belief. It does get a little chilly out here in Texas. It happens every now and then, but I know for us at Emerson, it's like once or twice we'll be outside for winter guard, but then we'll be back inside.
So Tim, because I know you worked with a lot of independent groups, what was acquiring space for an independent guard like in the area?
That is a nationwide truth. It is miserable, right? I think that when we first started Cypress in 2010, it was a very different world. Like a lot of high schools were excited to host you because in Texas, most 5 and 6A schools have 3 or 4 gymnasiums in their building. So it was usually not, especially if you went to a smaller 5A school, they didn't have as many athletic teams. So you could usually wiggle your way into one of those gyms. And those programs were excited to host you because that meant that their students could come in and watch you rehearse. And, we would trade favors, we would clinic them, or someone from our staff would spend some time with those guards during the week, whatever, might have. In the back half of Cypress, those last 5 years, things really started closing up. Administrations didn't want outside groups coming into their school anymore, understandably, with the way the climate was shifting. And it became a safety issue for the students of those high schools. We understand all of that. But now you're trying to, like the last 3 years of Cypress, we rehearsed in a CrossFit gymnasium on the weekends that had basically taken like an old airplane hangar and turned it into this gym. And they only did CrossFit classes during the week. So on Friday night, they would push everything to the side, and they were excited because they would rent to us on Saturday, Sunday. And that meant that they were still making money on the weekend. So they loved us, and we loved it because we didn't have to worry about anybody coming in, kicking us out. We just hit out and did our thing for the whole weekend. We didn't love paying that bill. So that changes things. And I know every group is different. I know, in talking to other world-class directors, it's a significant part of their budget that they have to pay for facilities. And that gets ultimately trickled down to membership dues. And I think that's part of the reason why you're seeing these fees continue to, rise.
Yeah, I know when I was looking at starting an independent guard in my area, the cheapest gym I could find was $70 an hour. Yeah. And if you want to do 4 hours on Friday, 10 hours on Saturday, I mean, and you start November, I mean, that's it can be $25,000 for your season easy, just for your gym space. And if you have 10 members, it's 2,500 a person. I mean, it's crazy. Let's move on to kind of the teaching philosophy of Emerson. We've kind of touched on it briefly already. What is your focus with the program? It is a newer program, and you've only been there a couple of years. Some guards, they focus on winning. Some, they are focusing on the art of it, or some are we're just here to have fun. What would you say your personal teaching philosophy is, and what you try to instill in the kids at Emerson?
I'll definitely say it's a mixture of all three. I mean, I'm always well aware that they're paying dues and sometimes they're a little bit higher than normal depending on the program that you're at. So I don't want to take away like the competition side of it because I do want them to be rewarded for what they're paying and investing their time in for. But I also want them to have fun and just like create a nice welcoming environment at Emerson. And I think what we've been able to do, especially recently, is that as long as I've been at Emerson, it's been very drama free amongst membership, which has been really great to see. So I guess like definitely trying to push like a welcoming environment and just having that philosophy be our foundation for everything that we branch into.
Awesome. And do you have any fun traditions that you all like to do? Like many guards have the little stuffy that sits on the 50, or the tunnel songs, or anything like that. Anything fun that the Emerson kids love to do?
Yeah, we definitely have a few. I mean, like they like bringing their stuffed animals to rehearsals and to have that be their crowd when they're rehearsing and doing performances. We started one up recently when I got in there, and that was just a pre-show hug before the performance. So even though like we don't sing or we don't do like a specific like saying before performance, like just getting that hug to calm their nerves. And I think that happened. I forget when exactly that started, but it's been just a ongoing tradition that we've always had as soon as I stepped in. And then one of the traditions that the members love doing is that they love taking a dab picture. Um, like just at the end of every like picture session that we take, there's always a dab pose that they do. And they've been doing that since year one when there's only four, and we're still continuing it to this year. And we're going to continue it to the following years. And I think that's one of the memorable traditions that they have. Now we have like a few like songs here and there that we sing, but for the most part, those are our big traditions that we like to do.
Awesome. And what is your schedule like? So I know we talked, you have class throughout the week. With only being able to do 8 hours to follow the rules, how do you break that up for your actual rehearsals? Like,
For the marching season, we go from 7 in the morning to 8:30 most of the week to get that 8 hour time frame. So I'm always doing a lot of morning rehearsals, which I was definitely new to up until I got to Texas. And I was like, oh, we do morning rehearsals. Perfect. This sucks waking up this early, but I get it. I mean, it's not as hot in the morning.
I was going to say,
Uh,
is that possibly weather related? Because I mean,
yeah,
August
yeah,
heat in Texas at 3:30, 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
yeah. And UIL has started to implement a lot of heat rules that we can't be out at a certain time, or if we are, it can only be for a certain amount of time. And if it gets too hot, we definitely can't be out. So they've definitely been implementing rules that hopefully all programs are following. So we definitely prefer our morning rehearsals to our afternoon rehearsals. And then every now and then for the fall season, I will do afternoon rehearsals depending on weather, just because, as the color guard, we're always playing catch up. So the more I can separate ourselves from the marching band and get what we need to done in a timely manner, the more efficient everything will be down the road for everyone without stressing ourselves out in the process. Because most of that 7 a.m. to 8:30 a.m. rehearsal with the band is just a lot of ensemble sections, not really like, oh, we need to work on this section as a color guard and really learn how this choreography works with this motion. It's just more so just an actual rehearsal with the ensemble. And then for the winter, I'm just there every day, all day. Because we have three winter guards at Emerson. We have our varsity, we have our JV, and then as of this year, we started up our third program, which is our Navy program. So I was there every single day, just with all three guards, depending on the day, Monday through Thursday, giving myself Fridays off to at least breathe before I go back on the weekend. But that's typically how our schedule works out.
Wow, 3 programs. That's crazy. And in just 4 years.
Yeah, on top of the middle school program too. So lots of things happening at Emerson, but lots of good things. It's a good level of tired.
Yeah, absolutely. What would you say your design process is like? So when you're starting to develop concepts, especially for indoor, because I know with marching band, there's a lot more people involved in that. So, but for your indoor shows, like when do you start ideas. I know you worked with Tim for the first time this year for this past year's show. How do you go about starting your design process, and how do you pick what you're going to do?
Well, I guess for me, when I'm working with a designer, I trust them to provide a product, and then from there, I've learned to just trust the process and just go with it. So with Tim this year, we obviously had a few conversations. I think most of them were just trying to get to know each other and trying to see if this was going to be a good fit and just try and get through that hesitation, which I'm very thankful it worked out. And Tim introduced me to Enjoy the Silence piece, and he talked to me about it. And I will admit, I was a little hesitant at first. And it wasn't mainly because I didn't like it, it was because of the tempo. I'm sure Tim can agree with that one. And the tempo was just like, oh, this is going to be tough. But I also don't like backing away from a challenge either. So I knew that as a director, this is a perfect opportunity for me to grow and like really push away from just a tempo song and just go into something that doesn't have a tempo and really push myself into that. But yeah, I just really trust the process with my designers, and whatever they bring to the table, I just have an open mind to it.
Tim, how did you connect with Bryan this year?
Well, Bryan and I have a mutual friends. My two of my production partners, Fernando Rodriguez and Skylar Mackinson, who are both at the Colts. They run the Colts color guards over the
Okay.
last couple of years. But we had done Clearbrook together. They were the silver medalists in Scholastic A couple of years ago. Grand Oaks, they were in Scholastic A finalists last year.
That was like the Black Sheep show, I think, right?
Correct. Yeah.
That's a
And
good
so
show.
those are, we jokingly call ourselves Team Tim. And when you find your tribe, it just goes so much easier. And so we do a lot of groups together now. I just don't like to work without those fellas because we all speak the same language. We have a shorthand now. But Skylar and Bryan are friends from Michigan, and they had all worked together at the Colts. And so Fernando knew that Bryan was looking to go to WGI this year and looking for a new design team. And so said, I think you two are going to be a really good fit. Like, you think about the activity kind of in similar ways. I think you guys would be a really good fit. And so Bryan and I started having a couple of conversations, and it was pretty clear not only that I think we would do this together well, because I think of myself not just as a designer, but as a producer. Like, I like to get my hands in it. I think I'm going to sound really obnoxious when I say this. I don't mean it to be hoity-toity. I just know it to be my truth from having made a lot of mistakes. But every piece of the puzzle matters. And I think sometimes in our activity, each piece gets broken up too much. Like, one person is designing the show, and then you bring in someone to stage the show, and then you bring in a choreographer this weekend and a different choreographer this weekend and somebody else on Thursday night, and then the movement person's different. And those people aren't necessarily always talking. And so sometimes all of the parts are good, but the whole isn't. And so one of the things that I have learned to be true for me in my process is editing is king. And so if I'm designing a show, I like to give as much information to all the choreographers. I like to create like a notebook so that everybody who's working on the show has access to information. In this phrase, these people should be on the floor, and these people should be halftime, and these people are the focus, and these people should be giving us choreography or whatever it is, and then letting all these brilliant artists put that through their own filters, but making sure that someone is like, making sure that each piece of the puzzle fits together into the whole picture. And not everyone is patient enough to let that process happen.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah. And so for me, when I'm deciding whether or not I'm a good fit for somebody, it's important that either we already have established rapport, or that I can talk to them enough to know what their goals are and what their process is, and if our two processes will align. And so this is such a unique situation because we had mutual friends. So it was obvious that like we were going to get along, because he wouldn't be friends with those guys if we wouldn't, but I wanted to make sure that our processes would align, because that's the worst thing, is to be working on a project and to be the wrong fit. Sometimes you can be a good designer, but be the wrong fit for a group, And so trying to figure that out in a very short amount of time on a year when they were headed to championships, that was a little bit stressful. That was a little crazy. So Bryan and I had to do a whole lot of conversations very quickly.
Oh yeah.
But for me also, because I do so much design work now, I am sort of this philosophy that like I have to constantly be creating. Like I need to constantly be thinking of like, oh, this is a cool outfit from the Met Gala, or wow, this movie really inspired me, or that's a great color palette. I'm constantly pulling things every day of my life and throwing them into, we'll call it a sketchbook, even if it's not a physical sketchbook, right? Just the collection of inspiration. And then I'm always working to try to figure out which of those things I can pair together. And then for me, what I've found is most successful is finding the right show at the right time for the right group. Because it's not just about making a creative show. If you write a cool show, but you give it to a group that's not ready for it, it's not going to go well.
Right.
And so, I mean, obviously, I'm an old geezer. I'm an 80s kid. I have loved Enjoy the Silence from the original Depeche Mode tune. It's been in my sketchbook since before I knew I had a sketchbook, right? I've always wanted to do it. And so one of the things that I have been focusing on learning myself in the last 5 years is clarity, like in that A class. So we talk so much about clarity of design, but really you need clarity of concept at the center. So like you talked about the Black Sheep show. It's like, I mean, you don't get any more basic than that. We want to just start as basic and as obvious with the print as possible. And now, how many different ways can we show that or explore that in an intellectual way? And so I started putting together the Silence show as an A-class vehicle, as simply that. Like, can I find some covers of it and mash that up? I have an awesome soundtrack person that I trust, Adrian Braden. And I knew if I found a couple of versions of that, he would work wonders with it and make it into something sophisticated. So it didn't just sound like a jukebox show. But I thought, wouldn't it be interesting if you could explore silence, not just audibly and, you know, manufacture in some silent moments into the soundtrack, but also visually? What does that mean visually? And so in hunting through Spotify and 300 tunes of Enjoy the Silence deep, I stumbled on the Whitaker and was like, oh my God, this must be brand new. Every world-class guard on the planet is going to do it. We can't. And then I went back and looked at the release date and it was 10 years old. I couldn't believe it, that I had never heard of it, that I didn't know of anybody who had done it. I thought, this is a treasure, but it makes it a lot more sophisticated now. It changes the tone and the timbre of it. So like, how do we fit that into an A-class lens? And we're like, you know what? It just needs to be more sophisticated, because obviously you want it to look like what it sounds like. And we just started really figuring out a way, as many different ways we could explore silence into noise, it back into silence visually as possible, and then figuring out what all those ways were and then how do all those pieces fit together, right? So like the costume change, we talked earlier about that. Like the costume change was a big one. Like we knew we wanted to be able to make that flag feature moment and release into the silence. So you get the release of the tension, you get another use of the concept of silence. Everybody loves a silent flag toss. We knew that was going to happen. And then we thought, well, because that flag feature moment was the biggest, fullest, thickest sound in the soundtrack, so that was your most noise. So what if that was print on print on print? And then how do you get back to the silence visually in the quickest way possible? Well, duh, a costume change. And what's the quickest costume change you can think of? And like you and I talked about earlier, I've been sitting on that Violet Chachki reveal for a decade, just waiting to use it. And so when we talked about that, it was like, well, duh, here's the time to finally use it, because we could literally change our outfit in 2 counts underneath that flag release. And wow, that would be a moment. People in the arena would stand up for that, you know, or at least clap very loudly. And so now we know we've got a killer moment. And so let's work backwards from there. and then just other fun things came into the play when it's like, okay, if you want to start in silence, visually that's white, and then how do you work to its opposite extreme, which is, obviously an ombre into black, but then let's take it another level and like, let's pull the lyric out of Enjoy the Silence, although you can't understand any of them in this choral version. But if you're in the know and you know the piece, it opens with that phrase, words like violence, enjoy the silence, right? And so using this idea of words, could we take all those letters, like if you dropped typography from the sky and created this jumbled, chaotic mess of letters, and now can we turn that into a print? And so are we not only ombreing from white to black, but we're also ombreing from solid color through opaque letters, through, more solid letters, through a jumble of letters, and then use that print in everything, so that biggest moment of noise was print on the floor, print on the flag, print on the costuming, and so then we worked backwards from there and said, well, if we're going to be white, what's the most visually quiet we can possibly be to start the show? Well, let's disappear the cast into the set. So now it's like, okay, in order to do that, we can't be in the black box of the theater that, we create in the UD Arena. We need to go 10 feet tall white so that we can disappear the cast into our now white stage, our white box. And then how do we make them completely disappear? Oh, wait, wouldn't this be cool if we come out of silence and musically it's getting not just more often is there music, but the actual music is getting more complicated as it goes. So let's show that through the staging. Let's start in small vignettes and have those vignettes grow bigger and connect into 2 groups of 3 become 6 and etc. and build through time into something that gets more visually complex. But now also let's do that with the costume. So instead of just changing the costume once, let's start completely white and not only change into black pattern, but let's do it through time. So that's one of the things I'm actually the proudest of. I think it sort of just happens. And until they do the trick where they take their pants off right there across the midsection of the floor to grab their flag out from underneath the tarp, that little visual trick, I don't think you really notice it. All of a sudden, it's just like, wait, now they're mostly black. What happened? How did that happen? But if
the uniforms definitely slowly, I noticed like a sleeve pull, and I'm like, okay.
And then the hood comes down, and then the
right.
jacket unzips. So it definitely happened in pieces through time. And in order to control the focus and have those things be happening, but not watching them happen, I mean, that's a lot of hours.
Yeah, I mean, the uniform was very complicated, and when I was watching Pride, because they had the obvious the uniform change as well, and I was just like, early on the season, I'm like, they still need to work on this because I'm getting moaned by some of the performers. They would just bend down and pull the pants down, and I'm like, you want to be as subtle as you can, and I think this show did it exquisitely. I mean, if you weren't paying attention, you're like, wait, what? The uniform changed, like, and it changed like 5 times, I want to say.
But this is the great example about Bryan and I working together. So it's like, okay, Bryan, what if we did this costume change, and what if they waited to take their pants off until right before they switched to the all flag? And what if we didn't have to go to the perimeter to get it? What if we create a scene old school? We used to have the floors in 2 parts, and they would just, overlap by a little bit. That's what that floor was. It just overlapped at the front third instead of across the equator, right? And so I'm like, what if we just did it right there in front of God and everybody? What if that's where we did our, costume change? And I'm sure I'm giving Bryan heart palpitations, because who wants to have to choreograph that, And then him and his staff are putting that through a filter and trying to find ways to make that happen in a really creative way that's interesting and intriguing. And then it's like, okay, so how they're taking their pants off is cool, but we also want that to be so secondary that if you blink, you miss it. If you look at it, it's great to look at, but we don't want you to look at it. So now how do we make the B part be so interesting? Let's throw a unison rifle toss. Let's have the first flag or the flag feature flag open up while the weapons are changing. Let's, and so there's this constant back and forth between us where it's like improv, right? They always say in improv, you do yes and, right? And so
Correct.
our process really is that. It's like, what if we did this? And especially for a first year collaboration, I mean, I have been bragging on Bryan a lot, and Bryan and I will work together as long as he'll have me because he never says no. He alluded to it earlier. He said, sometimes these things scared me, but I don't back down from a challenge. And that is 100% honest. He never said no to me. He was like, let's find a way,
And there was plenty of times when like Tim was giving me all these suggestions. Like there was this flag unravel, and there was a different part prior to that. And he was just like, "Can this flag just like slowly unravel through time?" I was like, I had no idea how, but I just said yes. And in my head,
I
I
want
was
to
just
say
like,
no,
"How
but
do
I
you do
will
that?"
say yes, and I'll figure it out. That's
Yeah.
very Bryan.
But again, it challenged me, and it made me grow as a director, as an educator, as a choreographer. And because of that, I was just like, "Oh, I figured it out. We just toss it in the air and it'll unravel itself. Perfect." And same thing with the pants. Like when Tim was telling me, like, let's just take our pants off in the center of the floor. The only thing in the back of my head was just like, oh man, this doesn't go right. We have no way of hiding.
It could go really wrong.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I also like the challenge of like, let's do it. Let's do it. No one else is doing it. I think it's a very rewarding thing if we can pull it off. And I love the challenge of just going above and beyond.
Yeah, I love it. And, I touched on it when we were doing the recap of just, this is a show you go back and watch and you pick up more things, like the little intellectual nods, like how you're all in the white. And then as the black starts to reveal in the uniform, you start towing the line of the black on the floor. And then as you move into the black, more starts to appear, like, and when you're talking about the flag unrolling, it's all white and then it tosses and then a little strip of black appears. And it's just like, it's so well thought out. And that was my biggest takeaway from it. I was like, when you watch it and you're just like, this is incredibly designed. Like, it's just like, wow. You came out in A class.
Yeah, we did.
And you and I talked. So I thought you got bumped at a regional of WGI, but you said your circuit actually bumped you.
Yeah, so I could definitely see how that happened across the nation. I'm sure like people saw like we went to a regional, we got first, obviously top two get reviewed. Someone has to get promoted at some point throughout the season or reclassified. And it was very coincidental with when we got reclassified because it was the following week. But WGI went through their process as they always do with every group who's in top two, and they decided to vote 3-2 to keep us in A class. But our circuit, they have a score that if you hit it, you automatically get reclassified to the next class. I don't agree with it. I'm making proposals about it. So we'll find out this weekend if they pass or not. But basically, like national A groups and open class groups on our circuit, if they hit a certain bump score, is what they call it, prior to a certain date, they will, without review, be immediately reclassified into the next class. And the week following the regional, we hosted our first ever contest at Emerson High School, which was fantastic. It was a great time. It was a very special time until we heard the score. And as great as it was, like I think we got like an 85.9, rounded up to an 86. It was still an insane score for that time. And we already broke the bump score for that week, the following week, I think even the next 2 weeks after that. So
you were well ahead of the bump score.
yeah, and so like there was no like I sent in an appeal, I sent in letters, I tried fighting it, but I mean at the end of the day, like we were 3-4 weeks ahead of the circuit bump score. And for me, this was different. Again, come from Michigan, come from Florida, they don't have rules to bump the A class and open class groups do to bump them because WGI does that for them. So they stay far away from those groups as much as they can. But in NTCA, they have that one rule that they happen to implement going into this year, I believe. And I was just like, no one's ever going to hit it. And spoiler alert, here we are. So that was a very stressful time.
Yeah, I'm sure. My local circuit, we have the bump score as well, but we don't bump from A to open or open to world. They just, because we break A into three different, we have A1, A2, A3, which is similar. The A1s are like the National Guards, the A3s are like the starter A guards. So you can get bumped from A3 to A2 or A2 to A with a bump score, but we don't ever promote A to open. Like even if you win A class of championships, you stay in A. Like unless WGI bumps you to open, you stay in A class. So that's interesting that they actually, your circuit bumped you from A to open.
Yeah, and I tried fighting it as best I could. I mean, I brought up the receipts of like the WGI said stay in A, you're saying don't stay in A, we're going to Worlds. And there were some other complications to it. I mean, like we planned on leaving Saturday morning of World Championships, which I know is very just like, whoa, no one does that. But with the being such a young program, prom was on Saturday for the students, and we had a very large senior class. And for them, for myself, any program or any members who tell me like, "Oh, we have prom same day as Worlds," I'd be like, "Oh, that's unfortunate." But this was their first ever official senior prom for their school history, so I can't really say that's unfortunate because this is something that's a little bit more special than a normal like prom for a 25 plus year established school.
Right.
So we were planning on leaving Saturday morning to get back down so they can go celebrate prom, celebrate Worlds, do all the things, and still do it together. But because of the bump score and the reclassification within the circuit, we had to go back and restructure our plane tickets, and we had to go back and restructure our hotel that we already covered. So it just added additional cost to the entire season that from the logistical side stressed me out because these were things that we did not plan for. Even though like in the back of my head, I always knew that reclassification was a possibility for anyone. I was just hoping it wasn't for us, but it happened. And I mean, we made it work. Tim was very great with his guidance throughout the entire thing. I know that he had Fergie and Skylar like prep me for open class and getting all that situated. And I think the biggest piece of advice that he gave me was just don't change anything. So that's what we did. We kept the staging as it is, and all we did was we added the tricks back in. So
Just bump the equipment difficulty a little bit
yeah.
for open, but
Which is honestly something that we probably would have grown anyway if it was inside their skill set. Like, let's start teaching these students to do these skills and see. And if they can do it well by March, then put it in, you know.
right.
But if they,
Yeah.
even in A class, if they're doing it well, sure, let's get credit for it. And so those were things that we didn't have to panic and sort of add all these extra layers. They already had those in the works. With the shortest amount of time that Bryan has been at the program, with this being our first collaboration, with this being their first trip, we knew we wanted to start in A. Let's make a great product. Let's try to create a great color guard, but we're not going to write a specifically A class show or a specifically open class show. We're just going to try to make something that's interesting that people will want to see again. And I think that worked really well for us.
Mm-hmm.
The only other advice, if anybody's listening to the podcast that, you know, is trying to get a takeaway from, that I don't see a lot of that helps most of my groups, but definitely helped us, is don't ever stop editing. You can clean and edit at the same time, but don't rewrite. Like, you want your performers at the end to be confident and comfortable and in control. And you can't be changing a minute the week before you go up to WGI and expect that to happen. But that doesn't mean that you can't edit while you're cleaning. So even the week before they left, we were sending emails back and forth going, oh, if those 3 rifles just turned the other way right after they caught that thing, it would throw the focus back over to those 4 flags. So, I mean, we were constantly doing small edits like that to continue to grow the product into its, you know, most ability to be rewarded. And I think sometimes people get stuck in the middle of the season and they just either just clean to the end and don't change a thing, or they panic and try to change too much.
Yeah, they get that feedback from the judges. They're just like, I don't know if this, they go to one show, they get that, I don't want to say negative feedback, but just, that like, I don't know if this moment's working. And it's like, okay, rewrite. Like, no, like, don't panic. Don't panic.
We definitely knew when we were putting it together that it was on the cusp between A and open. But I'll be honest, the first camp that I went up to stage live and I walked in to the gym and saw you were talking about it earlier, Eric, in terms of like some things just have more power live than they do on video, or a live stream. And that first rehearsal I walked in, those students carry themselves so maturely. They are so well trained. They are really serious about their craft. They rehearse like a world-class color guard. And so I was like, from that moment forward, I was like, if we do get promoted into Scholastic Open, this isn't going to be an issue for them. we're going to have to be smart about how we tackle it, but they're up to the task for sure. And so from that point forward, it was really easy for me to not panic. If it was a younger cast, we would have all been crying into our pillows at night, but thankfully the staff is smart and has trained them so they were ready for the challenges for sure.
I know a lot of open class directors from Marcus and even Flower Mound, they reached out and they're like, if you need like any support through this, like they're more than happy to assist during the process. So we had lots of support. I mean, Wiley reached out, Azel reached out. Again, lots of great programs had our back throughout the process. And it wasn't necessarily like help us like learn like what we need to change or anything. It was just like more just moral support. Like if you need us, like we're here for you. And that's I think the best thing that came out of all this is that I established so many more connections with so many different directors and now friends throughout this process. Like me and the Wiley directors, we got really close after the reclassification. I mean, I'm a big fan of their show and we did everything we could. I mean, even like finals night, like we drove up from Kentucky. We quickly changed, and then we drove straight to UD Arena to go help them with their floor because they were just our biggest fans throughout the entire season, especially after the reclassification. So yeah, just lots of more support that came from it.
Awesome. I love it. Yeah, it takes a village, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any humble brags you want to share? Anything you're especially proud of within your group? Obviously, the success you had this season is one, but anything else you just kind of want to brag about? Anything that you're just really proud of your kids or your program?
A few brags I want to say is this past marching season, we had our first ever caption award that Emerson has won as a marching band program, and it was for the color guard. And it was for both a prelims and finals event. And I guess that was a little bit of foreshadowing for what was about to come with the winter season. So that was a nice humble brag moment. Yeah, I guess like having three teams as a 5A school, like I'm sure Tim can elaborate more on that, but there's different classifications in Texas, and 5A, in my opinion, is more like normal high school. 6A is all those beastly programs that everyone probably knows of nationally, like Flower Mound and Hebron are 6A programs. So I guess for us to have like three winter guards in a 5A program is pretty dang awesome, just to go show like we're a large program for a 5A program.
Yeah, I've
And
had it explained to me before. So whether you're a 5A or 6A band depends on the school population, not the band size or anything, but it's the amount of the enrollment of the school itself.
correct.
So you could have 3,000 kids and I don't know the number, but say you have 3,000 kids, so you're a 6A band, but you could have 100 kids, 100 kids in the band. So you could be a small 6A band. It's all based on the school itself.
Yeah.
That's wild. Where I am, it's your band size. So if you have, over 150 kids, you're 5A or whatever they use. But that's crazy that you could be a huge school with a small program.
So that's another nice humble brag, in my opinion. And obviously, like the whole season itself, just to go from where the program was 4 years ago to where they ended up this past season is just huge in itself. I mean, last year was my first year with them, and we started off in National A, and I think we ended up third in the state. Like we were like middle of the pack at regionals, and so just to see that transformation from year one to year two is just a nice little humble brag moment too. Just go to show like what me and the staff and me and the design team and me and the choreographers were all able to just create and put together with these students.
Yeah, enjoy your success. I always tell people I don't want to, but no, brag, share your success, be proud of your accomplishments. Is there anything you want to tell us about this upcoming season? So are you a BOA band? I'm assuming you are, being Texas, or do you just compete in is it the UIL or what's the other?
What is the other one? I know we compete in UIL. There's other small shows, but they're just like mainly like McKinney Marching Invitation, which is just a school that hosts a show. So there's no other circuit outside of UIL, but we are actually not a BOA band. Not yet, at least. Who knows what the future will hold? But as of right now, we do not compete in BOA. I think that's a little scary for a small six or for a small Texas band right now. Especially when if we would go to a BOA regional, we would have to see Hebron and Flower Mound and Marcus. And I mean, that's just daunting in itself. And that's not even,
I don't think anybody wants to compete against them.
But we just compete in UIL. So we compete, actually, Melissa, fun fact, is in our UIL classification. So we do get to see Melissa throughout. I think we'll be playing them at a football game this year again. And we played them at a football game last year. And the director and I, we really got close at that. and we got to bring our programs together. So Melissa and Emerson, pretty relatively close programs, and we're only about 15 minutes away from each other.
Nice. And
Yeah.
will you be planning on attending WGI again, or will you not be taking a year off because of the rules? Or
Well, our district is a little different when it comes to the WGI thing. First off, we have to be able to show that we're able to prove that we can go there. So we have to show a lot of competitive success, and we have to show more competitive success than the other schools in our district, which there's 11 more outside of Emerson. So we have to prove that competitively that we are showing a larger gap between us and other programs, and then the district has to go and approve us. But the goal is that hopefully in 3 years we can go back and continue to compete again. If the senior class wasn't graduating, I'd be calling up the fine arts director right now and telling him that we gotta go back again next year. But unfortunately, 11 of the 14 are graduating, so big senior class. So we're doing a lot of not necessarily restarting this year because we had our other two programs to really help establish the program. So we're just polishing up this year, and then the goal is again 3 years from now we want to go back, if not sooner. And
nice.
yeah, everyone's in support of it.
Yeah, it's a shame that the rules in place. I just, because especially with your immediate success, it'd be nice to follow up your fifth place in open, go and compete in open again, full year in the class. That's a shame, but what's best for the program, I guess, and stay and build, and then show up again in 3 years and blow the doors off the place.
Yeah, go back and do it again.
Where can we follow Emerson Color Guard if we want to follow and see what you're doing next year, marching band, outdoor, all of that?
Yeah. So there's two sites. One is a TikTok ran by the students. It's called Emerson Flag Flippers. And the other one is our main Instagram, which is EHS Frisco Color Guard, or just EHS.
I think Frisco's in it.
Yeah, EHS Frisco Color Guard. So that's our official Instagram. So those will be the two places really look out for us. The EHS Flag Flippers that the kids run, that the students run, is just mainly just memes. Just lots of fun. It's more of our fun side.
Yeah.
And,
I mean, what you'd expect on TikTok. Yeah.
Yeah. And our social media, our Instagram, that's just a little bit more on like any information that you need to see, any videos that we post, all that fun stuff.
And I'm sure we'll see you at WGA Regionals in Texas.
Oh yeah, we plan on going back.
So hopefully Flo's always down there because, of course. The one thing that shocked me this year was there was no Florida Flow Regional. So nobody got to see any of the Florida guards.
And they're always good too.
Right. And I'm like, nobody got to see Tarpon, especially since Tarpon didn't go to Dayton. So it's like, nobody got to see Tarpon. Tim, anything you want to plug about yourself?
Thanks for letting us come on, and it's been awesome to meet you. The podcast is exciting. I think anything that any way the activity can continue to educate itself is awesome. Back as a dinosaur, back in the day, we had the first VHS and then the DVDs and then Fan Network. And without that, it's hard to pass on with, what you might call tribal knowledge.
Right.
And so it's difficult for people to learn the history of the activity they love so much. So I think this is so imperative to make sure that people have access to learn about things that they might not have the geographical ability to experience. I imagine it's an incredible amount of hard work. So thank you.
Yeah, it is. And it's a one-man show over here. So that's why it takes a little while for things to get put out. And I'm all about the guard history. And I think a lot of people are sleeping on 90s color guard. There's so much great color guard in the 90s, especially Scholastic World. I say 1998 Scholastic World is the absolute best class ever to exist. I wish I had a copy of that VHS or DVD because they're just, top to bottom, it's just amazing show after amazing show after amazing show. And I found clips and stuff on YouTube and started putting them on Instagram on the podcast page. And people are like, this is crazy. Like I put Miamisburg 98, the Firebird Suite, their flag feature, that spotless flag feature. And people are like, who is this? What is this? And I'm like, this is 90s guard, y'all. Like the 90s was all about the flag feature. And I love a flag feature. One last question before we go. I've been asking everybody, very simple. What was your favorite show this year at Dayton?
Ooh, this is a tough one.
It is a tough one.
Ooh, let's see. Can I do a Scholastic and Independent?
Sure.
All right. For Scholastic, it's going to be an easy one. I'm pretty sure anyone who knows me knows this answer, but I'm going to go with Wiley High School.
The Cruella show was a
Yeah, it's
blast. Yep.
so fun. So fun to watch. So good, too. And Independent, I'm going to go with Blessed Sacrament. I, I have no idea what they were doing, but I was just captivated the entire time from beginning to end.
Yeah,
So,
I like Blessed Second as well. I thought it was a little bit of a different take for them, like a different vibe. And yeah, when they whipped out those pink fans, I'm like, I'm sold. How about you, Tim? Did you have any favorites this year?
I did. Well, like I said earlier, it was my first year not being there live in a really long time. So everything through the filter of watching through TV, certainly, I'm sure it changes things. The stager in me has had a really difficult time letting go of Etude.
Mm,
Their ability to have multifocus happening and still perfect clarity of focus, but also how do you fit that many people on the floor in that many different groups with the perfect amount of negative space in between all of those elements for them to coexist? I felt very new to me.
yeah,
So
Etude was,
felt new even though they weren't trying to reinvent. And then layered over the top of that was an expressive element that felt important. Even if you didn't understand what was happening, you knew that something important was happening. And that's a nod to the performers for sure. So I thought they were really special this year. So many great things happening. And then on a Scholastic front, I just think it's exciting to watch Arcadia continue to reinvent themselves and to be so detail oriented in such a new way. They're doing things that people around them aren't doing and trying to figure out how to, okay, we're going to commit to this one prop, but we're going to use it 50 different ways in 4 minutes.
yeah,
And that felt new to me also. So,
yeah, using those black and white boards 2 years ago.
right.
I mean, I really, really loved the show 2 years ago when they had those black and white boards. And I'm just like, they are using these in every single way possible. And I'm like, they are getting the maximum use out of their props. And I even mentioned it on one of my early recaps. I'm like, if you want to know how to use props well, go watch this show because they use them so many ways. And they did the same with the tentacle props this year. It's just how many different ways can we use this and it be effective without feeling like overkill?
And so they're sort of recreating their identity, right, through the use of these non-traditional props as equipment. And yet the two vehicles were so drastically different. And so they're like moving forward and yet fresh from year to year.
Yeah. Love
I
it, love
think
it,
that's
love
to
it.
be applauded.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
yeah, of course. Thanks for having us.
Thanks again. Keep up the great work.
And that's going to do it for this episode. Thank you so much for joining me today. And it's good to be back after the post Dayton rush of doing all those recaps. It was a lot of recording, a lot of episodes. So took a nice little break. Good luck to everybody that is moving in for their pre-tour. If you're marching this summer, we will be talking about DCI later on during the season. But for now, we're going to be getting back to our standard bi-weekly releases unless something pops up. I am waiting on the rules proposals to be posted. So we might do a special episode on that if there's anything notable within them. But until then, I will see you all again in 2 weeks where we spotlight another program. And as always, stay safe, stay fabulous, and remember, at the end of the day, it's just flags in a gym. Bye.